Hello and welcome to the Security Journal UK Leaders in Security podcast. I'm your host, Becci Knowles, and I'm the editor of Security Journal UK. This podcast will be focused on the growing importance of AI in smart video and what it means for the UK. That's why today I'm joined by Peter Hayles, Product Marketing Manager HDDs at Western Digital, and Jonathan Pratt, Head of Product at Concept Pro, a leading security manufacturer. Peter, Jonathan, how are you both?
Good. Hello, yeah, very good, thank you.
Okay, great. Well, let's kick off then with the first question. Jonathan, I'm going to direct this one at you. What are the main components of a smart video system?
Brilliant, thank you, Rebecca. So for a smart video system to operate, there's a few main components, really. First of all, you need hardware to capture the video itself, to capture the footage. That'll typically be an IP security camera. Then you need hardware to record the video. So that could typically be a recorder with hard drives installed or a kind of cloud-based or service storage. And when you've got the video and you've got somewhere to record it, then you really need to be adding the intelligence, right? And this is where the AI comes in. This is where we deploy artificial intelligence. And there's a number of ways that this can be deployed. It can be embedded into the cameras itself or into the recorders itself on the edge, as we refer to that. Or you can have dedicated hardware that can essentially run the AI by pulling the video streams from that existing infrastructure that we've talked about. Or it can even be completely remotely run on servers, taking video over the cloud.
Peter, what do you think?
So the analytics can even begin at the camera end of the process, because the cameras are often out a long distance from where the network recorder is based. And frequently now cameras would have a specialized SD card, memory card within them. We have the WD Purple card, which is specially designed for surveillance and also has tarnish-proof coating, because you may be using the cameras outdoors. And you may have a location maybe by the sea where you could pick up tarnishing on a card. By having that memory at the camera end, you're capturing, you're processing, but also you have local storage. So if the network connecting the camera back to the recorder, if that gets busy or a delay or it's deliberately cut, you already have at the camera, you have a local record of that file.
Okay. And Peter, from your point of view, what other features are needed in terms of data storage, for example? I know that's something you can speak at length about.
Yes, so for smart video, you need a large amount of data storage, both for the processing of the video, but also to keep an archive of events that have happened. And the workload in smart video is very specific. There's a very large amount of writing to the drive and limited amount of readbacks. So the drives that we supply have a specific firmware that's designed to cope with the workload of smart video and AI as well.
Okay. And in terms of the specific AI technologies that are used in video, what are those technologies? Jonathan, maybe you could come in on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in really generally and broadly speaking, it's mainly video-based analytics, which is essentially object detection, right? So, we've got technology that can identify an object of interest. It's been trained on how to pick up on those characteristics of that object, and it can then essentially track the behavior and the movement of that object. And when you bring that together, you can apply that to a number of scenarios. So if I look at specifics in how we deploy at Concept Pro, standard in all of our IP cameras, you've got what we call AI-based motion detection. This ensures that an event is only triggered when motion is caused from an object of interest, and that's usually defined as, say, a human or a vehicle when we're looking at security applications. As you move up and as you get more kind of more expensive processing and better capabilities within the hardware itself, you're able to then deploy more complicated applications of AI. And this is where we can now start tracking the behavior and the movement. So instead of looking purely for motion of these objects of interest, we can actually trigger events based on how they behave. So are there multiple objects of interest loitering in an area? Are they breaching a perimeter that's been predefined? We can then create events on the back of specific behaviors. And then as we move up even further, you can get real bespoke hardware that can run even more powerful algorithms. And this is where we can kind of move into a really exciting space, almost away from the security applications and into additional benefits. We can tell if somebody's wearing the correct PPE, for example. We can tell if somebody's fallen over. And we can apply this AI technology to bring benefits outside of just protecting a site into health and safety and other applications that businesses can take advantage of.
Sure. So in terms of the threats that need to be mitigated, what are those threats? And are there specific AI technologies that help you identify those?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a number really that you can go at. So I guess initially the first thing that people might come to mind in a secure application is protecting public safety, reducing crime and reducing antisocial behaviour. So if you take an example of, say, a camera installed near railroad tracks, an area could be drawn around those tracks and configured to alert if a car or person is detected intruding inside that area, and subsequently connects to, say, an external alarm panel to kind of raise an event and alarm that can really prevent tragic consequences from, let's say, a person falling or a vehicle breaking down on the tracks at that point. Another example is you can use loitering detection to detect people who remain kind of in the configured area or an area on private property that they shouldn't be for too long or for a set period of time. And that can serve as an early warning system to kind of take preventative action from crime from taking place or to protect a private property and people who shouldn't necessarily be there. And then you can move on to other threats really and move into things like I mentioned before, health and safety. We can reduce accidents in the workplace. I talked about how Phil on person can be deployed, and you can put that into things like lone working environments on construction sites. So all of a sudden we can protect the perimeter of a site and we can protect the property on there. But we can also use the same infrastructure that we've deployed to protect that property to start increasing the standards around health and safety and really improving the standards really in that work environment. And it just doesn't really stop there. You've got the ability to reduce shrinkage in retail by identifying suspicious behaviours as they happen. And really the applications can go on and on. In general, AI, I guess, allows us to cut through the noise of activity by alerting when an event of interest takes place. And what you define as noise and the event of interest really helps define how AI can be applied really to mitigate certain threats in certain industries.
Right, I see. And my understanding is that it looks for patterns, doesn't it? Can you tell me about those patterns and why?
Yeah, sure. So I guess AI can identify patterns of behaviour, which can be really useful in kind of forensic applications. But the way AI fundamentally is trained is by feeding huge amounts of data into a system, right? For the AI to be able to recognise that pattern, as you put it, to be able to come to a conclusion on what it's seeing, and it's that pattern recognition that allows the technology to be able to be confident what it's seeing is kind of what it's describing to you. Being able to tell the difference between a tree blowing in the wind and a human, for example. Being able to tell the difference between, say, a small vehicle or a truck, all the way to being able to read and identify license plates. It's that pattern recognition. And basically machine learning to teach AI how to identify and recognize those patterns into meaningful information.
I see. And perhaps this is a question that for both of you, really. How can an organisation determine what type of video analytics are best for their needs? How do they know that it's AI that they need?
So from our perspective, from what I've seen in market, you start with the challenge, right? You try and understand what's causing you problems. Are you trying to protect high value items? Are you trying to secure a perimeter? Do you want to know more about your customer behavior, for example? Are you looking to drive operational efficiencies? Or perhaps there's like a step in production if you're in manufacturing that's causing a lot of waste or has too many errors. You really start at the challenge, and then I'd say reach out to the experts. Really, I'd say reach out to us. At Concept Pro, we've got people who can talk through the suite of AI applications that are available and how they can be deployed to help those specific challenges. But if a person wants to understand it better themselves, a good place to start is to really think about how AI analytics work. They work on learning and objective interest and being able to track that movement and behavior, as I've said. If you take that principle, you can get a really good idea of how you can deploy that within your business.
Okay. Peter, over to you.
So different organizations will have different requirements when it comes to video analytics. In some cases, and of course there's legal requirements as well, the first thing to remember would be that camera resolution and length of storage all increase the amount of the size of the data files that you're storing. In addition, you have to look out for how long will you need to store the data and at what location. So you may have a certain amount of, for example, a system may have analytics at the camera end, which would reduce the amount of traffic moving then from the camera to the NVR. Within the NVR, you will need to have drives capable of processing that data and also storing it. And either then you may store longer term locally, or you may offload it to a second server or even over the cloud to a remote location. It's very much tailored towards each of the requirements and workloads for each individual customer.
So how might constraints in a company's hardware, bandwidth and monitoring impact the type, accuracy and performance of the AI analytics adopted? That's a big question, that, isn't it?
It is. It's a really, really good one, though. It's really quite interesting. A big limitation in the accuracy and general performance of AI is down to two factors, really: the hardware that it's running, and the efficiency of how those algorithms have been written. If you don't put the right amount of processing power behind the algorithm and the application that you're looking to deploy, you're not going to get the level of performance that you necessarily need. And that's why you get different types of AI application on different products, right? That's why, on some of our IP cameras, you'll get AI motion detection, and on others, you'll get the full suite of behavioral and tracking analytics. It's because we make sure that we put the right applications on the right hardware. So I would say the best place for a company to start is to ensure that, what they're deploying has the right hardware for what they're trying to deploy. And you mentioned again about bandwidth in there, and that's another key factor, right? It's a key issue when talking about transferring video data over say a cloud or internet network. And a lot of AI will run on reduced image quality and a reduced frame rate, but it can require continual video streams to analyze the footage effectively. So one of the best ways to navigate that is to have the AI processing on premise as part of the local network rather than part of their external internet infrastructure. It's much cheaper to scale up an internal network, and if you've got the processing of the AI happening at source and on premise, you kind of remove the need of having to transfer large amounts of data over the internet to be able to process it effectively.
And Peter, I'm guessing from your point of view, when you're speaking with customers, how do you convey the benefits of being on premise customers? Yeah. How would you do that?
So you'd have to talk to the customer and find out what their requirements are, because as Jonathan said, you may need a certain amount of processing and storage done locally, but you have to realize the large amounts of data now that is involved in smart video. The move from SD cameras to HD to 4K has the file size now is multiples of what it was even 5 years ago. So there's a limitation on what is suitable to store locally, and then you want to have reliable, high capacity storage then maybe for a remote or cloud location. And this is where you may need to, and this is where you can tailor it to each individual customer, because even something like the bandwidth in the local area can decide when and how much data you can transfer from the local system back up to the cloud.
That's interesting. So is that like a bit of a postcode lottery, depending on what the internet provision is like in certain areas? Will that affect businesses?
Well, yeah, it can do, but then it could just affect the design that you might have. You might have larger surveillance drives locally. For example, we're coming up to 24 terabyte now in storage, and that's in each individual drive. So multiples of that gives you a very large local capacity, and then you may even have to schedule a time, maybe 4 o'clock in the morning, to do your backup to your cloud, to work around that. But it's specific to each site, and we've seen that effect in the last 10 years. You've gone from, we'll say 10 years ago, looking at a 1 terabyte hard drive. Now it's 24 times the capacity. And because AI requires a big data set, you're going to need to hold the data so that you can process it. And I'm presuming camera resolution will go up again from 4K further up. So the actual storage requirements are going to be multiples of what we're looking at the moment.
Okay. And how would you say that AI is changing the role that video surveillance plays for companies? I think this is one that I'd put to both of you, really.
So we're seeing a huge change, right? If you look at security in itself, it really does enable security to be proactive in preventing damage or criminal activity. Instead of typically being reactive after the event. One key example of this is how AI is probably most popularly deployed in the security industry, and that's to reduce what we refer to as false alarms. If you take a site that's being monitored, you can get events from a number of different methods. But if you're overrun and overwhelmed by events that aren't necessarily going to warrant action or aren't necessarily a reflection of what you're trying to monitor, you end up either being bogged down in a lot of effort, or you end up missing the key points, really. So by reducing false alarms and freeing up more time for security team, by reducing the false alarms, it also frees up more time for security teams to perform other duties, but it also allows incidents to be seen before they become an issue, right? And you can take action then, whether it's audio challenging, whether it's calling security on site, whether it's deploying security guard that's already there to the area that the activity has been seen. The idea is you can now be reactive, and you can be reactive really quite effectively, whereas previously it's a bit more of a challenge to take that reactive approach. But one of the biggest transformations we're seeing really is AI's ability to provide a return on investment outside of security applications for companies who choose to deploy AI through their surveillance systems, right? So, I touched upon it a little bit before in health and safety, and there's a ton of commercial applications that you can use what would traditionally be security cameras for to drive business intelligence, really. So we can now get aggregate data on demographics of customer footfall and times and dates and even granular information on how customers are behaving in store in terms of where are they looking and how long are they looking for. So how interested are they in kind of a product? And really, there's no real limit on how we can deploy AI to help businesses. But that's, I'd say, the biggest transformation is seeing businesses really switch on to the idea that they can utilize their security system for far more than just crime prevention.
Yeah, and
Peter,
just as Jonathan was saying there, if you go back several years ago when this was only used as security video, and many companies made large investments in systems, cameras, networking, all of that. Well, if you add AI in on top of that, and now you're looking at a pretty much very similar investment in the hardware is already there. You're just upgrading, but by adding AI, you're getting a much, much larger bonus. And also, as AI is based on analyzing a data set, the more that you collect the data and you analyze it again or add to it, then your AI actually gets more accurate. So you're getting much more of the benefits then from more of the efficiencies, more of the safety, more of that area on your original investment that was a security.
I see. Okay, and what are the concerns though? Because we do often hear that companies have concerns, don't we, about the use of AI in surveillance? How do you answer those concerns?
Yeah, and I think they can be valid, and for me, it comes down to the deployment of the technology, right? So I would say when you're talking about concerns, privacy is going to be one of the biggest concerns for companies and the general public. And there are regulations that do concern more sensitive technologies such as how facial recognition can be deployed, and there's lots of discussions at a really high level on kind of how to ensure they're deployed in an ethically correct way. How we ensure that we tackle those concerns is by working closely really with our customers to develop technology to be deployed in the right way. So when I talk about businesses using AI to generate better business intelligence, we're talking about delivering the information to them in an aggregate way, right? So you would see like a dashboard that they can log into where they can see between this hour and this hour you had this many people enter your store of roughly this age group and kind of roughly this estimated gender. We're not we're not setting up to track an individual with personal information to understand how that individual is behaving. We're presenting the data in a way that's aggregate, so it can be used to inform really positive business decisions without really compromising the privacy of the individual.
Okay, and Peter, how would you sort of respond to that? How do you respond to your customers' concerns?
Yes, there are customer concerns, and first of all, in many countries now, there are legal requirements that address AI, and over time, there will need to be more. But if you look at data retention as being one of the more recent ones, customers now are required to store data for 30, 60, 90 days. Also means that there's also the look back elements that if someone were addressing concern about AI, you now have got the data going back over time where you can actually look back and see, well, was this done correctly? Was this in compliance with whatever is now the latest legislation? And the fact that you have got that store of data, both as an archive, but that's the data set that AI will use to regenerate or to generate more and more algorithms over time. So the more data you have, the more accurate it gets, as well as being an archive of a time period.
What will AI in video be able to do in years to come that it can't do now? What does the future of it look like? Jonathan, over to you.
Yeah, it's such an open question, right? I mean, if you look at what AI could achieve a few years ago to what it can do now, it's absolutely mad. You look outside the security industry, you can create videos from text alone and pretty realistic looking ones as well. And if you looked at kind of the attempt of imagery that was AI generated before that, it was almost laughable. That kind of growth is very difficult to predict and very difficult to understand really where the technology might end up. But from my perspective, there's really very few limits in what can be achieved with the correct deployment of AI. I guess we're already seeing more autonomy in surveillance systems thanks to AI. We can detect and track suspicious behaviour in real time, and I only expect that to get better and more accurate, and for those trends to continue in that direction, really. But in terms of specific deployments of where the future lies, God, it really could be anywhere.
And what do you think, Peter?
Yeah, the effect is going to be substantial. But then if you look at the benefits of it, if you were, even at the moment, the monitoring, if we just look at security and surveillance, the monitoring there of live coverage is already very, very difficult, with say for 1, 2, 3, 4 people to do in a large site. Whereas by having AI, that will be highlighting the areas these people need to focus on. So it's a tool, and it's up to us how we use that tool. But outside of that, the industry, I mean, overall, yes, you said we're only starting to see the effects of AI now.
Absolutely. Well, that's great. Thank you so much, Peter and Jonathan, for speaking with me today and for such a brilliant discussion. Also, thank you to our listeners for tuning in. I hope that you've taken some valuable advice or thoughts away from this podcast to ruminate over. Thank you again to my guests, Peter Hayles and Jonathan Pratt. I've been your host, Becci Knowles, and this has been the Security Journal UK Leaders in Security podcast. Keep an eye out for our next episode coming soon. Bye-bye.